Hello, my name is Christian Montel, and this is a new episode of Artificial Intelligence in Human Resource Applications. In the last episode, I had the honor to talk to Professor Dragoş Iliescu about the nuts and bolts of potential analysis processes. What makes an assessment a proper one? What are required features? Will artificial intelligence be able in some point of time to bypass these principles? What risks do companies take if they try anyway? And which role does human gut feeling play in potential analysis processes? Given it was such a delightful experience to chat with Dragoş about these topics, we decided to do a follow-up session, which we'll do today. And we'll talk about practical challenges for companies which use AI products in their recruiting process, as there are, for example, how to keep candidates in a multiple hurdle process. What role do fairness reactions play, and how do they relate to employer branding? And how does it feel to have to convince a computer of your potential given you're a candidate? We'll also talk about some promising applications of artificial intelligence within the recruiting process, and we'll talk about ethical challenges to using AI in such a process. So one more time, a very warm welcome to my special guest, Professor Dragoş Iliescu. So you were mentioning things like intelligence and stuff quite often, quite frequently. I'd like to know, or I'd like to ask you, if you have to compare the job artificial intelligence has to do when assessing current performance, or when it has to, say, predict potential future performance, which one is harder for both of it?
Prediction is always harder.
Okay.
It's always been harder for psychologists, and it is also harder for artificial intelligence systems, of course. That's actually the nut that we always try to crack, and people may not realize that very well. I mean, if you assess somebody for selection, in a selection context, for hiring, and you administer a number of psychological tests, and then you measure mental ability, and then maybe personality traits, and maybe motivation, and so on. If you do that, you're actually not assessing. You assess that person at that moment, of course, but what you're trying to do, you're trying to predict future performance.
Okay.
Because this is a question that sometimes clients ask. Who you have two candidates, you have assessed both of them. Who are you going to hire? And then the answer is usually the one who is better. Well, who is better at what? No, it's actually a predictive context. You're trying to hire the one who is going to be better in job after you hire them, but because you can't really know at the moment of hire how well they do. You have to assess job performance for that. Yeah. So how well do they do now? I don't know. I didn't assess their performance. I mean, imagine that you want to hire a marketing manager. What are you going to do? You have two candidates and you want to hire one. How does the work of a marketing manager look? Maybe you can give each of them $200,000 and let them play around for a few months and see their vision. Obviously you can't do that. Yeah. They are going to have that budget after you hire them. Yeah. But in order to predict what they are going to be able to do then, and maybe in 2 years from now, or maybe in 5 years from now, you assess something now that is going to be used as a basis for prediction of future behavior. Yeah,
it sounds like trying to hit a moving target in a way.
It is a moving target, yes. Also because sometimes you can't analyze the antecedents of effective behavior so well. So what does future performance mean? You should definitely say performance when, performance immediately after hire, performance in 2 years from hire, in 5 years, or in 10 years from hire. And then, of course, you can look at that behavior or those behaviors. What is actually performance? we also have errors in how we analyze those behaviors. So can I really define what performance means? And then it's also a moving target because organizations sometimes change their lookout on performance. And then you hire people now to predict performance in 5 years. And then in 5 years, we're going to understand a different thing by performance. So,
and how does human psychology deal with that kind of problem? Because like formally, it sounds to me like it's a it's in the quality of the problem, this thing. And how does human psychology deal with that? And to what extent do you believe will artificial intelligence be able to catch up on this?
Yeah, well, the basic, and this is the claim of artificial intelligence systems, that the basic claim of artificial intelligence systems and of psychologists is not different. And the basic claim is that past performance predicts future performance. So this is the basic claim. So if you've been in all your professional history a conscientious person, and then I have references about that from your previous employers, and I have sample behaviors from your past, past observations of you from, in social media or other such situations. And then you've been conscientious for the past 20 years in different settings. You're very likely to also be conscientious in the future. Yeah. So that's the basic principle on which we work. And then if we train machines to assess those traits, why wouldn't they be able to also do the prediction further on? And what I say is, yes, it sounds reasonable. However, what an HR specialist does, or a work psychologist or an occupational psychologist, is that it's not blind prediction. You always have that layer of consultancy in which you talk with your client. What do you actually understand through performance? Let's do something that is called job analysis. Yeah, let's analyze the job. Let's look at the tasks. Let's look at the activities, at the work context, at everything that is important there. And what you very fast see when you're in training, you just finished your BA and maybe your master, and you begin to smell a little bit about how consultancy is done. Immediately you see that every case is different from the other. So I wouldn't presume that if I've done it for a company, it's the same for another company. And artificial intelligence is extremely lousy in this. Once you train the model, that model, that's a trained model. You can't work. You can't tweak it. So we've tried to train models, and I've done a lot of work on that. Computational psychometrics. This is how it's called. So it's psychometrics, but with a very strong computational layer. So we tried to train models in order to predict future performance in a specific job in a specific company.
I see.
And based on past performance and on past data about the performance of employees and about their psychological traits. So that's also psychological potential, if you wish. So based on those data, we can do a quite good prediction of that performance, but you have to train the model. A lot of work goes into it, data, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now we try to predict performance for exactly the same job with the same label and virtually the same description. Different company, and it doesn't work. So it doesn't work, or it works very poorly. Why is that? Because much of what somebody does in their workplace is explicit, of course, and then you have it in the job description, but a whole lot is implicit. So you don't have it written down, so it cannot be analyzed. So you have to get the hang of it through interviews and observation and experience. And this is something that the consultant does. This is why you need consultants. That's why you need psychologists there.
Not only for that, but...
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that there is more to it than just administering the tests and doing, making a decision based on a cutoff, and okay, a machine can replace that.
One might argue in some near future that AI solutions will conduct interviews with candidates and tell us the candidate's job fit or potential. let's just assume for the one moment that this became reality. What challenges do you think does that imply for companies who would rely on such a product?
Yeah, and it's not so far-fetched. I mean, some of these are reality now, and we already have research looking at that.
Okay.
So what research shows is that the largest challenge that a company using that would have is in the domain of fairness reactions, candidate reactions. Is how, as we call them in the selection literature and in organizational psychology, usually candidate reactions, fairness reactions. And
Okay.
This is based on the fact that people, when they feel assessed,
Mm-hmm.
they need the idea, the fact that somebody assesses them fairly. And so there is an assumption that assessment is fair. You're in a competition and somebody is, it's an asymmetrical relationship. Somebody is higher than you and assesses you, but other people who are in the competition do not get an unfair advantage. So there is some logic in what's happening there. Yeah,
Okay.
it can be explained. Okay, so and we know fairness reactions are very important. They are part of they are the best predictors of the fact that people keep in the process, because
Okay.
most selection process, most assessment processes are multiple hurdle processes, where of course you have a very short test, and then you have an interview, and then later you have an assessment center, and then later you have, and then you sift out people in different phases. And okay, so and what's happening now very much and more, and I see it in the literature also, and I see it also in my practice, is that people don't come to the second one or to the third one, or so they simply don't show up anymore. Yeah, so they don't keep in the process. Now, the best predictor of that is fairness reactions. Yeah, and then of course fairness reactions, candidate reactions are an extremely important predictor for employer branding, which is more and more important now if you want to have external equity to attract good candidates, and so on and so forth. So it is important. Great. So the best predictor of fairness reactions, when you put aside individual differences, the fact that some people are by default more contestatory than others, okay, but the best predictor is something that is called opportunity to perform.
Okay.
So the fact that you have on the other part an interlocutor, which is a human, which should try to impress and to convince, and it is in your power, in your control to do that. Yeah. So there is a game to be played, and it's in your control to play that game. Yeah. So opportunity to perform. And what usually happens with AI is that candidates have a much lower they rate their opportunity to perform much lower. Yeah, because
there's a computer
it
and
has
not a
this
human
sense
on
of
the other side.
arbitrary. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get you.
Okay. And so it sounds like you recommend against it.
I am not necessarily a big fan in some contexts. I mean, what I think is that AI can help a lot, especially in those contexts that were very manpower intensive. Yeah, and then it can guide you, it can help you, it can, for example, I've seen AI system doing wonderful coding regarding body language in interviews or assessment centers. So I've seen.
Are you joking, or are you on?
No,
really?
no, I've seen that happening. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not actual assessment, but I can rely on that coding when I draw my conclusion. It's not the assessments. It's not the AI system that does the actual fact. Yeah.
I see.
The actual scoring, the actual decision. But it is a system that I, as a specialist, can help. And together with other information, and having also this kind of information, I can reach to a decision, and this will help me because I will not have to code this. Yeah, I've seen AI system. If you use Zoom, for example, you have a very nice system that gets you all the verbatim of an interview. If you do an online interview, you don't have to pick up every word from the recording. That's also an AI system. It can help you. So hell yes, why not use it? Obviously. And you have a whole range of systems that are AI based and and that can help you in different parts of the process. Yeah,
I see.
but when you try to sell, and you're not trying to do that, but some people try to sell that, HR specialists are going to become obsolete, and AI is going to take over the whole process and everything and the decision. I say, okay, this is simply, I don't see it happening. And I also don't see it happening because I see significant ethical problems here. And yeah.
So letting an artificial intelligence assess humans makes feel many people uncomfortable to a big extent. Which ethical challenges, you just mentioned the ethical challenges, do you see appear in applied HR settings?
Yeah, well, I mentioned ethical challenges because I do believe it's important. Our profession, my profession, I identify as a psychologist. Arguably, I'm an HR specialist, but I am a psychologist, and ethics is interwoven in the very fabric, at the very basis of our profession. Mm-hmm. So I feel that very strongly, and that's why I bring it up. But at the other hand, it's also very instrumental. I mean, people bring it up. So people feel offended by some, it's not just that we believe this is important. Candidates believe this is important, yeah? So if we don't take care of that, it may have repercussions. Now, there are at least, 4 categories I can think of just right at the top of my head that are important in this respect. I'm going to just mention them briefly here, and then maybe we have time to talk a little bit about each of them. So first of all, in AI, when AI systems are involved in assessment, we need to talk about confidentiality and limits of confidentiality. Mm-hmm. We need to talk about tolerance towards misdecisions. We need to talk about the explainability of results, and about the right to appeal, or to, which is important in more formalized contexts. And I can take each of these 4, and there are others, I'm sure, but just taking them and discussing them briefly.
I would love to. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So confidentiality, obviously, when you talk to a person, that person is in a professional role. Mm-hmm. It may be a psychologist, but it may be a non-psychologist in an HR context. That is still a professional role. And there is a certain level of confidentiality involved in that. Yeah. So, of course, there are always limits in confidentiality. Obviously, I'm not going to tell my interlocutor everything that you tell me now is between the two of us, because I know it's not right. It's not correct. Yeah. So there are limits, but I'm going to tell them the limits. Yeah. So if you tell me about something illegal, I have a professional obligation to report that. If blah, 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 blah. And then the recording of what we do here is going to stay with the company records for so much time. And these are the people who are going to be able to look at it, and so on. So you never have full confidentiality. There are limits to confidentiality. But then if you have an AI system that is recorded, and who knows who is going to have access to that? Yeah. So you don't have that human promise. Mm-hmm. That some things are going to just stay between the two of us, and nobody's going to know about them. So that is important, and it's an important ethical category. Mm-hmm. Tolerance towards misdecision, that is also important. I mean, when you humans always make mistakes, and there are some AI systems that are much more infallible than humans are. There are some, yeah, less error. Yeah, there are some. So yeah, great. At the same time, even if an AI system or a machine system makes less errors than a human, the errors are taxed much more severely. Let me give you an example here. I have a former doctoral student. She's a doctor now, a PhD. She wasn't a psychologist. She's a philosopher, and I was involved with her thesis as an external examiner. But her PhD is in philosophy. Yeah, okay. So she's a philosopher working on moral judgment. Yeah, moral reasoning. But fundamentally non-experimental, because few philosophers do experimental work. Most it's about thinking, about reasoning, and so an extraordinary PhD. And she works in Silicon Valley for Google. For their and I will say, why do those are engineers. Why do they need a philosopher to work in their team, in the team that develops self-driving cars?
Okay.
I mean, this is bizarre. I mean, I'm proud of a Romanian working there. I mean, that's the, top of the top. But yeah, and she says, Dragoş, the technical problems behind self-driving cars have been solved 15 years ago. I mean, that's a non-issue. It's not a problem anymore. But if you have a driver having a car accident and killing a person, that driver, it's just human error. You're not going to go to jail for that unless you've been drugged and drunk and did it on purpose. And okay, you're going to have all kinds of trouble, but shit happens. And this is one of those. Yeah, but if a car is doing that, you're going to be sued because that was programmed by someone who, so it is by design. So it wasn't just an error, it was by design.
I see.
So what are the limits that users have, and what's their tolerance towards misdecisions that are built into AI systems or assumed by AI systems? And that's a discussion, that's an ethical discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Very interesting one. Yeah. So
the third. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to come back to the other two we are still missing.
Yeah. So explainability. So you have a basic right for explanation.
Okay.
So you just you. Otherwise, it's just I don't know if I'm a huge fan of Monty Python. Monty Python's Flying Circus, and some remember their type of humor, and in Little Britain that was picked up by others, and British comedies. Computer says no. So some may remember that. Yeah. The computer says no. Yeah. So it cannot be. It cannot just be that kind of system. And what happens with AI assessment usually is that the system, the computer, is going to say yes, no, 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 yes, no. And then obviously you're going to ask why. And the problem is that usually it's theoretical. It cannot be explained. You can't explain why this is like this. But people have a right to that. And by the way, in psychology, we have an obligation to give feedback after the assessment. So we have to give feedback. It's their right. It's their data, and they have a right to know what's happening with it and how we did interpret them, and to offer explanation. And the AI system cannot do that. I mean, he's going to say yes or no, and why? Well, because 2,000 variables have intertwined in such a way that it's no. Yeah. So. Okay, and then there's, especially in very formalized contexts, like for example, in most of Europe, and also in the United States, when you have selection or assessment for public servants, so in very formalized and high-stake contexts, there is a fundamental right to appeal. Yeah, so I do believe that you didn't score my test right. So let's score it again. There is another commission doing that, independent. So how are you going to play that with an AI system? I mean, it's going to be the same result, obviously. Yeah. So how do you fare with the right to appeal? Appeal to who? Appeal in what way? Appeal. Yeah. So and there are others that come to mind now, but these four are particularly obvious for me.
Thank you for joining us this time. In case you got any thoughts, feedback, or pending questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email to livestream@iligo.de or leave it in the comments. Our next session is scheduled for Friday, the 3rd of May in 2024, 14 CET, the usual time. And you can access previous sessions under www.iligo.de/livestream. If you like it, please bring a friend next time and consider signing up to allow us to keep you updated. Thank you very much and have a beautiful day.